I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'm going to ask you to rise and turn to the right for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now we're at approval of agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve or amend the meeting agenda.
Madam Chairman, I move that we approve the agenda as written.
Okay, thank you, John. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor, oh, I'm going to do a roll call. Leanna, all those in favor?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Craig?
Aye.
And Art?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And I don't have any public comments on agenda items that have been turned in to me. And our student board members excused tonight. So we're at board member comments. Leanna, do you have anything?
I do not have anything since our special meeting. That was a really good conversation, I think, and watching all of the videos or being part of the Zoom meetings with the parents and watching the questions being answered, and then having those available for the community to see. I think that was really well done. So just a second hurrah on that.
Okay, thank you. John?
I have nothing to say.
Okay, Craig?
No comments.
All right, Art?
My regrets on missing the special meeting, so I do have a couple of comments. Not that I've done a whole lot with respect to school stuff, except there's a couple of things that came up. One of them just today, but one that came up a little earlier, I did send to the superintendent a notice from the camping industry has been, of course, working on the same stuff with coronavirus and that sort of stuff. And they came up with some information, which I passed on to the superintendent about how to safely run, in this case, run camps. And the specific document was to deal with recommendations to schools, which I sent to the superintendent. The gist of it very shortly is, stuff can be done, except you have to have buy-in by everybody involved. And that is really difficult. There's been failures in the camping industry from a couple of you probably heard that from a camp in Georgia that had all kinds of illnesses, but there have been some success cases too. And it comes down to, if the people cooperate, then some good things can happen. But that's the gist of it. Enough said on that. The thing that came up today, actually really yesterday, was some research that about a study in Massachusetts in particular, but there's been other studies that have corroborated this as well, but which is kids play a much larger role in the transmission of coronavirus than we have thought all along. And that is the research-based finding. So enough said, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Art. All right, we're at consent items, and I would entertain a motion to approve or amend the consent agenda.
Madam Chairman, I move that we approve the consent agenda as given.
Okay, thanks, John. Is there any discussion? All right, we'll have a roll call vote. Leanna?
Aye.
John? Craig?
Aye.
Art?
Aye.
And I vote aye, and the motion is passed. So now we are at number 3, Resolution 18G20, Reduced Educational Support Program. Has everyone had an opportunity to read this resolution? Dana, would you like to speak to this? Can you unmute, Dana?
Yeah. Can you make this bigger, please? I can't read it to address it. So basically what this resolution is about is that due to the situation that we're in with the coronavirus, we have a need to make reductions in things like staffing. Because if we're not present, we're not going to be doing things in the same way, nor are we going to be funded in the same way. So this is making it clear that that will take place, so that there are educational support positions, all of whom have already been notified that we have had to make cuts and that their positions are not available for the coming year at this point in time. If we get back to school and things, then that might change, but for right now, that's where we are. And to cross all our T's and dot all our I's, even though we have made those notifications, it's important that the board make a resolution to support that this is the decision that we've had to make.
Okay. And I think it's important to notice that it does say that if the district resumes operations in a hybrid manner or regular manner, that employees would be recalled to the extent that the support is needed, as Dana just said.
Yes, and we've had in-depth conversations with both of our classified bargaining units, because that is who this affects, about that. And we've talked about what that might look like. And we are going to continue those conversations. As recently as last Friday, I think, Ashley, it might have been Monday, my days are flowing together. We had a conversation with our UFCW unit. We are also planning an additional follow-up Zoom meeting with classified staff so they can ask questions. We can talk about this some more. We've done one about this particular issue already, but we have one thing we have learned through this crisis is the value of doing these Zoom meetings with our different constituencies. So it's been very effective for us to talk with teachers, to talk with classified people when we have issues or when things are coming up or when we know what our plans are going to be, and to talk with our parents and families. So we will continue to do that.
Okay. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Dana regarding this resolution? Then I would entertain a motion to approve resolution 18G20.
Oh, I do have, I'm sorry, Laura, my mute button wasn't going. Is this, these positions being reduced, is this a direct correlation with reduced state funding, or is this just in anticipation of reduced funding? Have we already lost this money or have been told that it will be gone?
So these reductions are reductions in positions that we are going to lose the money, the transportation money, for example, but these are also positions that we don't have any work for the people to do if we're not in school in person.
Okay.
For example, if we're not bringing kids to school and the money that we get for driving buses is specifically for to from school transportation, we wouldn't have anybody driving those buses. So we wouldn't need bus drivers. And although those dollars may be available to schools in apportionment for the first 4 months of the year, if we don't spend them to drive kids to and from school, the state will recover them in February.
Do you foresee any action at the state level of either changing the rules or not taking money back that's unused?
At this point, unless they change the RCWs, they will take the money back that is unused in transportation specifically. There is a lot of action from all sorts of individuals and groups, and I believe that our legislators and our governor are really feeling the heat on this issue of specifically transportation funding, because that's the biggest hit here that this resolution is addressing. For example, in our district, if we don't drive kids to and from school, essentially our transportation department has all been laid off. Now, we still would have our mechanics, there's still work for them to do. If we determine a need to bring some kids with special needs into school sooner than others, then we would have limited bus routes. So we would start bringing bus drivers back. But until, I think keeping the pressure up is really important. And I know that our district, other districts have been working very closely to help the press make some pressure happen on this, as well as through the channels of sending letters and setting up meetings with appropriate legislators and with the governor's office and various folks, that this really is, this particular part of the issue is huge. As far as other classified positions, we have been very careful in looking at what positions would not have work to do if kids were not in the building, because unlike last spring, when we were told to, go ahead and we would keep getting money to pay our employees, and of course, and go ahead and pay them and they could just be at home. We haven't been, that is not the case for going into the fall. So if people don't have work to do, we cannot pay them. So we've been looking very closely at some of those other classified positions. We had to reduce additional parapro positions and activity assistants specifically. We do anticipate, though, in PSC that we may be creating different positions to support our students learning in this new environment. And so those folks would have an opportunity to be rehired in those new positions once we determine what those will be and how best to support our kids.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I have
Another comment? Another comment, Laura?
Leanna.
Yeah. So in the transportation funds, this is one that I guess it makes me sad, but so could we use, if we had transportation funds, could we use it in other places in the transportation area? It doesn't just have to go to the drivers. So if we could find like things that if be needed, that we could do other things with it.
That's a tad bit complicated. So Dana had spoke to the fact that we would still be receiving transportation apportionment for the months of September through January. It will be about 750,000. Now, out of that 750,000, right off the top, we have employee wages and benefits for 4 individuals that were the only individuals not laid off within the department. Now, in addition to that, we also have the cost of the maintenance vehicles, fuel, and those type of things running through that, along with all of our reoccurring expenses. We looked at trying to shut off the radio service to the buses. It costs us $800 a month. Unfortunately, if we shut it off, it either has to be all or nothing. So if we turn around and we bring any of our students back in small groups, we can't just turn it on for a bus. So those are all reoccurring expenses that we're going to have to continue to pay, even though we technically aren't using them, unfortunately. That's all coming out of the $750,000 pot. In addition to that, the state will allow us to roll over about 470,000 of that 750,000 into next year. So let's say worst case scenario, our transportation funding gets stopped at that 750,000. We don't receive a single penny from February through August of this coming school year. We'll need to roll that 470,000 into next year if there's any hope of continuing to provide transportation if the legislators don't act on changing the RCW. So it's a very, very complicated situation we're
Because
facing.
what happens, Leanna, is the funding formula is based on ridership. And
Yeah.
so if we don't have ridership all year and those funds are cut, they're not only cut for this year, they're cut for the beginning of next year, because the money we would get to start the year is based on what we do this year. And so it would be zero. But I don't know if you're referring to, but in the spring, for example, we took advantage of the funding that we had and the flexibility that the state allowed to use our transportation staff to deliver meals and schoolwork and stuff. That is specifically not allowed under the funding model, so we can't do that. We would love to do that. School districts as a team across the state have made that point very clear to the folks who work in Olympia. We hope that they could make some changes there, but we can't, you know, if we're solid fiscal managers of the funds our district has, we cannot spend that money now hoping that the legislature will change the rules. We're going to have to be very careful with that money until they, and if they do.
So I guess that kind of covers my second question, but that's truly unfortunate that we can't use it in those other ways. But my other question, I guess, was could the drivers do other jobs that weren't driving jobs and be paid out of that money? But if it's on ridership, then we can't.
No, that we get that money specifically for paying them to drive, unfortunately.
Okay.
Leanna, it's important to, I mean, as you talk to the people you talk to as well, I mean, it's the same question. You can't use capital funds for general operating funds. There's specific pots of money for specific things.
That's kind of where my question, sometimes my questions are highlights. So partly I knew, but I want people watching this to also get the full answer to that I couldn't give. But that also answers the other part of the question that I didn't understand. So yes, and thank you. That totally makes it right.
Yeah, we are, I mean, nobody was comfortable with the decision that we had to make there, but it was the decision that we had to make to be fiscally responsible as a district.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments?
One right
Okay.
here.
All
Sorry.
right.
Thank you, Dana, for bringing up the part about the food delivery and stuff. I had just had a thought regarding that, which I think anyway, you've answered. But just in case, there's creativity involved in trying to figure out how to get students to be transported. And just a thought that comes to mind, which is probably not a viable one, but what if students were, believe it or not, delivering food to other students as a way of being creative to try to find out if some ridership would work that way? I don't have the answer. I just trying to, stimulate some more creativity. That's it.
I love that suggestion, but with the current language, it is to and from school for school's purpose that we're funded for. But I love that idea. As far as feeding students goes, we do have a plan that we highlighted last week that students and families will be able to pick up meals at each of our school campuses, including in the evenings on Wednesday at Belfair, so that provides flexibility for families who wouldn't be able to do it during the day.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Do I have a motion? Did someone make a motion here? It's been so long, I forgot.
So moved.
Thank you, Craig. Okay, if there isn't any more discussion, I'll call for the vote. Leanna? Craig?
Yeah.
John? Okay. Art?
Yeah.
Aye.
Okay, and I vote aye, and the motion passes. And now we are at the 2020-21 budget presentation.
Ashley, you're up.
Okay, so I'm gonna do our presentation this year in a little bit of a different format. One of the things I think we've heard quite clearly from the community is the need for the utmost transparency in everything being presented. So instead of creating a PowerPoint where I'm picking and pulling numbers from our budget document, I decided I'm going to present directly from our budget document. So there's no questions where the numbers were received. They're directly off the document. Now, the full budget is 105 pages long. I won't bore everyone with that. But I did provide the summary budget, which has all of the same information in it, just at a higher level. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to pinpoint some of the specific items that will show sort of variances from last year, or technically the 1920 school year versus our upcoming 2021 school year. So I'm just going to start on that very first page that starts with the budget and excess levy summary. This is our overall summary document. It covers all 5 of our funds: general fund, ASB, debt service, capital projects fund, and transportation vehicle fund. The revenues that are deposited into each of these funds can only be spent on those individual fund purposes, and they are governed by RCWs and WACs on the appropriate use of those funds. So starting with the general fund, which is the column furthest to the left, one of the things that I want to highlight is the fact that we're planning our ending total fund balance to be $3,257,241. Now, this is going to be quite a bit different than what we've seen in the past years. So I know that we've talked in the past about how our funding apportionment has changed, so that we're getting about 25% of our funding technically after the school year has ended. So in the months of July and August is when we're getting that funding. So from now on, we're always going to see our ending fund balance, which is our beginning fund balance for the following year. We're always going to see it higher, seeing as how our extra funds, or our funds where we have revenue in excess of expenditures, are always going to come in July and August now. So we should expect to see a fund balance that is higher in the end of a school year and lower as the year progresses. So that's why we're seeing about a $3.2 million ending fund balance. Our beginning fund balance going into this school year should be right around $2.9 million. And then going over to ASB, the planned budget, and the ASB's budget specifically, the students in the upper campuses, so middle school and high school, they're the ones that actually put together their ASB budget. I just combine the numbers for them. And in the elementary schools, the building staff, principal, and secretaries are the ones that put together their budgets. So going into the 2021 school year, our beginning total fund balance for ASB should be around $378,000, and by the end of the year, they're planning on it being around $306,000. Now, they were doing the budget when they thought there was probably a fairly good chance that they would be starting school in the fall. I don't expect to see a whole lot of ASB expenditures out the door during the fall, or at least until the kids can actually return to school. So we'll see what that does with their budget as the year progresses. So the debt service fund, if you guys recall, we did, prior to me certifying the debt service levy collection last November, the board took a vote and we lowered the collection rate for that levy going into the 1920 school year in order to sort of use some of that budget capacity that was left in that fund balance. So going into the 2021 school year, we'll be certifying a debt service levy right around $2.2 million. That's to cover the bond for the building of the high school and the remodeling of the other buildings. But our ending fund balance at the end of the 2021 school year should be right around $595,000, which is sufficient for fund purposes. Capital projects fund, this is a fund that I'm actually sort of excited to see close out. It's one less fund to have to work on. So we have about, we're planning to have about $730,000 left in that fund as of this coming September 1st. So over the course of the 2021 school year, that $730,000 should be exhausted by August 31st of 2021. Now, currently, we are in the final stages of 4 projects that are being funded specifically through the Capital Projects Fund. We've reported on them in the past, but just for sake of clarity purposes, that's the softball field on Centrex. And then the early kindergarten portable, Sand Hill roof, which is almost done, and then the stadium. So all 4 of those projects are sort of in their end stages. And by the time they've all been completed during this school year, we should see a ending fund balance of $0. The Transportation Vehicle Fund. Over the course of the next few years, I've worked with Maureen, our transportation director, on sort of a plan to sort of change the way that we're purchasing buses. So instead of piecemealing them out 1 or 2 at a time, sort of building our fund balance so that we can purchase a few more at a time. A lot of times we can get a discount by purchasing more than just a single one. And in addition to that, it helps with our depreciation funding that we receive in August of every single year. Now, we do have a bus, a large bus that's going to be delivered on August 27th or 28th. So here in about a week. And once we pay for that bus, our beginning fund balance technically our beginning fund balance, which is our ending fund balance for this year, will be right around $147,000. So before I go into any of the other detail, do you guys have any questions regarding this high level purview of our sort of budgeted numbers for any of our 5 funds?
Actually, I do this, Craig. On ASB, with having no school and unknowing it, in the event that we don't have school at all this academic year, are those dollars, are they refunded to the students, or do they just stay in an account?
They're all invested. So I have all of the ASB funds invested into the state pool, earning interest. So those are monies that either have been received by students through fundraising efforts, or they're monies that have been donated specific to students for the use in the ASB fund. So there's no risk of losing the money, and I invest literally to the penny to keep technically our cash balance in the bank at 0, so that we're earning the most interest for the students on those funds.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, any other questions before we move to the next section? Okay, so now we're going to go to page 2. So this starts our general fund summary. So the system, a budget is, it's based upon a document called an F-195. So in the school district world, that's what we call it. And it's comparing our actual figures from 2018-19 to our budgeted figures from this last school year, 2019-20, to what we're planning to budget for the 2021 school year. Now, if you look at column 3 and column 5, those are the 2 columns that I'm going to be highlighting specifically here. Now, these are the comparisons from what we were budgeting during 1920 to our upcoming school year. And this is where you're going to see a lot of the reductions due to the double levy failure. Now, the reductions for COVID, seeing as how we didn't necessarily know during the time we were drafting the budget what exactly they were going to look like, those aren't being reflected here. This is based upon the reductions that were done due to the double levy failure. So during the 1920 year, we had budgeted to have 2,260 students, and that's FTE, or full-time equivalent. Now, what we actually ended up with in February of 2020, prior to, which was our last full count prior to school closing, we ended up with 2,333 students. So obviously quite a bit over what was budgeted. Now, we always budget enrollment more conservatively, seeing as how our funding in the beginning of the year is always based upon budgeted figures. If you over budget and the state gives you too much money, they will take it back lump sum starting in February. And no district wants to be in a position where they're having a bunch of money taken out of their account. So we budget it conservatively when it comes to enrollment. And if we have a happy surprise with more student enrollment, it just means that come January, the state has to make us whole. Now, going into this next year, this was a tricky number to have to budget for, as in what we're expecting our full-time equivalent to be with a remote, hybrid, online type of schooling going into this year. Now, for budgeting purposes, we budgeted at 2,329. This is about 4 under where we were in February, so we didn't necessarily increase it, but we sort of kept it whole. And our hope is that's where we will be going into this year. And if it is, then come January, we won't have any surprise reductions in our funding. Now,
May even have an increase.
yes, we've been looking at the numbers almost daily at this point to see what we're looking at going into this school year. So that is a very real possibility. Obviously, the finance side of me is always the pessimist, and then Dana has to bring out the optimist in me. So, so for certificated employees during the 1920s, go ahead.
One thing, Ash, I'm sorry to interrupt, but one question I have specifically regarding that. Do you foresee any unusual FTE increases or declines just by virtue of the remote learning, where maybe parents feel, well, we're not doing it here, we're quick to, perhaps they're maybe quicker to pull the trigger to go to another district or homeschool, or do you foresee that those enrollment spikes or dips being a lot more intense?
I feel like we've put together such a robust plan for schooling going into the fall, as in we have so many different options for families. You know, if families, for example, some families were considering, okay, well, we'll just do K-12, you know, we'll pull our kids and we'll homeschool and do K-12. Well, we've already partnered with Fuel Ed and Edgenuity to be able to provide those type of resources to students in our district without parents having to pull them and homeschool them. So,
if I may, some of our neighbors are seeing 20% or more of their students who have and families have selected online options within the districts, and in addition, significant decreases to their overall enrollment as of today. Here in North Mason, as of today, we actually, and you know, I will temper this with the Ashley pessimist side. We are actually sitting above the projected enrollment right now as of today, but we, you know, the secretaries just got back, so there will be some kids who withdrew over the summer that they haven't pulled out of the system yet. We have less than 10% of our kids who have selected our online options, or any online option, as much as we are aware at this point in time. So we have a little bit different response than some of our neighboring districts. So it's been a discussion among districts in the region and the state all summer, is how big a negative impact on enrollment is opening in the COVID environment going to have this year. And for right now, 2 weeks out here at North Mason, it looks like we, as Ashley said, we've offered enough appropriate options that it's not going to have a negative impact on our enrollment. And in fact, it appears we might be growing.
okay, so the next set of information.
Ashley, I wanted to ask, when kids come to school and they're in their homeroom, the teacher takes enrollment, turns it in, or does it online. How will enrollment be taken when nobody's in the classroom? How will we know?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. I've been helping all the buildings understand what attendance looks like this year. So the State Board of Ed has created some new rules for attendance for the environment that we're in. So it starts with the idea is now not so much around what we used to say butts in seats, having a physical body in the school, as around student engagement. So enrollment starts by looking at what students are registered in your programs. The second step of taking attendance then is, how are students being engaged? So for example, in our district, that's going to be done in a couple of ways. kids who are doing anything where they're engaging with school online, whether it's through HomeLink, North Mason Online, or our hybrid learning remotely for right now kids, will be signing in through ClassLink to get to their schoolwork every day or whenever it is that they do it. When they sign in through ClassLink, that will take attendance. That will tell us that Laura signed in for math today. For those families and kids who don't have connectivity, we have another option written into those rules. And this is what that is. We come back to the word engagement. So those kids, it will be kind of a reverse attendance rather than taking it on the day. It will be very important that the teachers and school staff stay up to date on what work is brought back to school, turned in by those kids. So kids who do not have the opportunity to sign in daily through ClassLink, we will take their attendance based on, do they accomplish the work that was assigned for that day? So we have an expectation for our classes this year, for our teachers and our students, that our students will have the state required number of hours and minutes per day of planned instruction and activities. So if Laura is a student working from home without connectivity, when she completes those planned activities, she will be marked present for those days of that work was planned to do. So that gives families a little bit of flexibility, because if Laura's family, the schedule doesn't work and she's going to do a lot of that work with her mom on Saturday or in the evenings, that's okay, because she gets the work done. So she gets credit for Tuesday's work, whether she did it Tuesday night or Saturday morning. So does that make sense? Yes, Leanna.
So if a kid was, say they got the flu and they're puking all day and they didn't do any work, they're not going to be counted absent as long as Saturday they did the work and turned it in.
Well, there's kind of a combination. They can still call in sick.
Okay. So
Yeah.
how would that be? How does that work? So I feel like
We're still learning.
felt if somebody was watching this and said, well, so it's half the kids that don't have connectivity get to turn in their homework and they're counted for every day as long as their stuff is done. But the other kids that have connectivity that didn't connect that one day and now they're counted.
No.
Counted down?
Ultimately, all the kids that do all the work will count as being there all the days when we get done with the whole process. But for those kids who don't have connectivity, we only have one way to count their attendance.
Okay, I wanted to make sure
More than
that
one way.
people understood that, you know, we all know that things are happening and it's a crazy world right now. And, but the kids wouldn't be counted absent if they had to do the work on Saturday and not on Friday. Is that?
If the work gets done and turned in.
Okay, that's what I mean. I just.
Leanna, I think, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but the sick days and stuff, that's more of an attendance issue with regards to truancy, other outside, not necessarily the academic realm when we're talking about like, you know.
Right, well, I guess I'm trying to figure out how are we going to deal with the truancy part? I mean, what if somebody was sick that day, didn't work? How are we going to have
No, we're not. Right now, we're just worrying about kids being engaged in school.
okay.
So regardless of whether they have connectivity or not, if we're not hearing from kids, they will be hearing from us.
Okay. Well, and that's great. I just wanted it to be like one day we were having a bad, sick day or whatever, and then we did all the work on Saturday. But even because we had connectivity, I didn't want to say, because I'm talking kind of as a board member, but as a parent too. Like, what would I need to do? Do I need to call in and say Monday or Friday my kids throwing up on Saturday?
We just got the rules 2 days ago. So
Right.
the principals and the office managers are working on what that procedure will look like in buildings, and we'll inform families of that before
Okay.
school starts.
Okay, so that was it. When you were saying those two things, that it makes sense. I get it.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, Ashley, I really took us off the rails with that question.
Oh, not a problem, not a problem. Okay, so employees. So for the 1920 school year, we had budgeted at 171.5 certificated staff members and 125.846 classified staff members. Now, going into the 1920 school year, so this would have been August of 2019, we had made some last minute cuts. We didn't fill some positions that were open. So in reality, in 1920, based upon our S275, which is a document that's reported to the state to show our staffing levels, we actually had 166.822 certificated staff members and 116.712 classified members. Now, when you take those numbers and look at column 5 for our 2021 budget, you'll see that going into the 2021 school year, we have budgeted to have 152.173 certificated staff members and 98.622 classified staff members. So you do see a fairly significant decrease to both certificated and classified staff going into this current year. That is due to the cuts that we had to make due to the levy failure. So that is specifically why we're seeing a reduction of the staff there. That reduction has nothing to do with COVID or with the resolution that you guys had approved earlier in the meeting. Those individuals are not reflected there. Okay, so going down.
Sorry, another question, just for a clarification. So for the 2021 year, but column 5, when it comes to the FTE classified, actually certificated and classified, those differences reflect the loss of local dollars.
Correct.
So that 152.173 for certificated employees and the 98.622 for classified is straight up, that is what the state pays for basic education, and the differences in column 3 reflect what local dollars provided. Am I correct in that?
Sort of. Okay, so it's a tad bit more complicated. So technically, the state does not fully.
I understand that's the FTEs versus number.
Oh yeah,
what I'm saying actually is I understand that it's not a one body FTE, but what I'm saying is when we talk about what the state funds for per pupil and the basic education, Basic Edge McCleary, those are the numbers that the state provides.
The state is only funding 32 classified members for our district. They only fund 32 and we have 98. So when we look at it that way, basically what we're doing is we're pulling state apportionment dollars to fund the rest of those employees.
So, but some of them are funded by, federal grants and other state grants like Title and LAP.
Okay.
And
so I think you're a lot more into the weeds than I am on that question, whereas I'm talking about this is apportionment funding. The state gives us, boom, this is what you get for your allotment, versus the difference when in column 3, when it's a difference of, really quick math, 27.2 FTEs in this classified. Local dollars made up that 27.2 FTEs.
Correct.
And it's almost 20 FTEs in the certificate. That was local levy dollars.
Correct. That is true.
Thank you. Sorry for the.
Nope, not a problem. So we are seeing the reduction in both the teaching staff and the classified staff due to the local levy failure there. But in order to ensure that we still had a fund balance and could pay remaining employees, obviously the reductions had to occur, seeing as how we didn't have the extra for the 2021 school year. It was approximately $2.7 million, seeing as how we will still have a October collection, because the October collection is for the 2020 calendar year. and 2021 is the calendar year where we will no longer have a levy. So we had to absorb half of the reduction this year. If we are not successful in another levy attempt, unfortunately, we will have to find places to cut an additional $2.7 million going into the next budget year. Obviously, that can be for a later discussion. So now when you go down to the expenditure summary by program groups, you're going to see where the reductions are taking place. Okay, so this is sort of in the middle of the page, right underneath the bolded section. Now, a lot of that reduction has to take place in your regular instruction area and in your what we call Program 97 or support services, which is the very top line and the very bottom line of that section. Now, special education, comp education, all of those, we get funded and we have to spend what they give us. And if we don't spend what they give us, then they take it away. So it's sort of an in and an out. So if the federal government gives us more money, then we can spend that money. They won't give us anything else, but if we don't spend it, then they take it. So you'll see that those programs, for the most part, we're sort of, we are seeing nominal increases in them. And a lot of the cuts were from just our basic education programs and our support positions that sort of help in the classroom or in the offices with day-to-day business. That's where the cuts ended up having to come from. Now, if you go down a little bit further on that, but still on that page, expenditure summary by objects, there's two unbolded line items underneath it. This is where you see the certificated salaries and classified salaries, what they were budgeted at as far as total dollars during the 1920 school year and what they're currently budgeted at for the 2021 school year. And you can see the reduction there of quite a few $1 million that were cut in the certificated salaries and classified salaries area. Now, in the 1920 school year, we were at about 91% of our total budget with salary and benefits. Because of our reductions, we are now down to 80.69% salary and benefits. That's a solid target number to be at for any given year. And so we're basically back at target, but the only way we could get there was by doing the reductions. Now, our total benefit percentage since SEB, the School Employees Benefit Board, was enacted in January of 2020, the total cost of benefits for any employee has skyrocketed. Right now, on average, for every employee we have, whatever their salary happens to be, we have to add about 41.68% to that base salary. And basically that's what that employee costs. So for example, an employee who grosses each year $50,000, the district actually pays out through mandatory federal deductions, state deductions and such. That employee that makes $50,000 gross actually costs the district $70,840. So that is fairly steep from what it had been before. So whenever we budget to add a position, we have to add about 42% for benefits to determine whether or not the district can afford that position as it stands. Do you guys have any questions specific to benefits or salaries or the employee FTE going into the 2021 school year?
Yeah, Ashley, Craig again, of course.
Okay.
What was those benefit costs prior to SEB?
So prior to SEB, we had two different numbers. Classified employees, their benefit percentage tends to be higher. And certificated employees, their benefit percentage tends to be lower. That's just because of the gap in pay between those two types of positions. So we used to be looking at, you could turn around and you could budget for a certificated employee about 25%, maybe 28% for benefits. And for a classified individual, you could budget about 32 to 35%. On a conservative side, and now we're up to 42% across the board.
Wow. And for less benefits, right? Or it's
Yeah.
kind of an inferior plans.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the most frustrating things, and a benefit package that we have zero control over, which has actually been extremely frustrating during this entire process because SEB mandates who can have benefits versus who can't have benefits. It's not controlled by the district anymore.
Sidebar on this one. When it comes to, say, the 21-22 school year, do they simply send you guys a notification saying, hey, your benefit costs this year are X number of dollars?
They send it 3 times a year. They update it 3 times a year.
So it could change 3 times in a year.
Correct. Exactly, which then also makes it very
Makes a lot of sense.
difficult to budget for because we can budget
Yeah.
for the number we have at the time, but we don't know what the changes will be throughout the year.
Probably an irrelevant question, but under the old system, were the benefits locked for a year or a 2-year
Yep.
period, or okay?
Yep.
So it's a lot easier to plan. So
Exactly.
there's been no benefit to SEB at all for us.
The only benefit that I could see from an employee standpoint is more employees qualify for benefits, as in individuals who would normally be deemed part-time employees outside of the school district world qualify for benefits when they work for a school district.
But for us specifically, that hasn't been necessarily the case, right? Because a lot of those employees who now benefit already had a setup
Correct.
through their own whatever their personal situation was.
Correct.
So for us specifically.
Well,
Right.
and it's made it difficult because districts can't necessarily afford to pay benefits for everyone because they are so expensive now. And so districts have had to find a way to stack positions to ensure that they have less employees working more hours so that they have less employees collecting benefits.
Nickels and dimes, economics, I guess.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so
That's all I had. Thanks.
okay, so I'm going to skip the fiscal year enrollment and staff counts. We've sort of already gone over that as a whole, so there's no need to drill into the detail there. But on the summary of the general fund budget, there's just a few things that I wanted to highlight, specifically in column 2 and column 3 in regards to that 1,000 series of revenues or local taxes. So you can see in the 2019-20 budget, we had, even though we had a levy that had been passed at about $4.6 million, we were still rolled back for the first half of the year, so that October collection. Therefore, we had budgeted to collect $4.1 million for local levy. And you can see for the 2021 school year, we're going to be at about $2.2 million. Again, that's because of the October collection that we have, which is our last collection of the calendar year 2020. April of 2021, we will not have a collection, which is why we see that that number so low. So if we go into the following school year without a past levy, that number right there highlighted will be 0. Okay, so I've touched on all the high level pieces here as far as enrollment, staff counts, and funding. Do you guys have any specific questions based upon anything else you may have seen in the 36-page summary document?
Anybody? Okay, it looks good, Ashley. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. And then do we
go
want to
into
go
the 4-year?
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay, so Jackie, if you want to bring up the 4-year summary. This one was very interesting to try to put together, seeing as how, since we do not have a levy in place, I could not include the funding. Okay, so this sort of shows what happens when we don't have a levy. Now, our enrollment, based upon the forecast that we had done, shows that we will have increasing enrollment based upon the development and birth rates in our county. So I didn't want to put our enrollment stagnant. I wanted it to increase like it should, regardless of whether or not we have the levy funds. So our enrollment over the course of the next 4 years will increase. Now, if we want to scroll down just a bit, Jackie, on the bottom of this page, you're going to see staff counts. Okay, so when it comes down to it, in future years, even without a levy, we're getting to the point where cutting additional staff past an additional 8 classified staff positions would be unbelievably detrimental to the district as a whole. We've cut and trimmed everywhere we could possibly trim going into the school year. So when I was trying to balance a 4-year budget, based upon the fact that we don't have a currently passed levy, it became extremely difficult. Now, what I can say is our certificated staff, there's no further room for cuts because they're all funded. So we have literally cut down to what the state funds. If we start cutting more certificated positions, what ends up happening is we start breaking class size compliance for our kindergarten through 3rd grade, which means the state turns around and takes more funding. So we can't afford to cut more staff in that section without, it's a catch-22 without us losing more revenue. And then when you look at your classified employees, even reducing another almost 8.7 FTE, it ends up having a significant impact across the district as a whole. Even when we went through the process of having to do the reductions going into this school year, it was extremely difficult to try to find additional places to cut, especially when, we do have union employees that can only work 40 hours a week, 8 hours in a day before they're in overtime status. And you don't want to get into a position where you're having an individual basically take on 2 people's worth of jobs and then you're paying them overtime. It defeats the purpose. So what you'll end up seeing throughout this document is a reduction in money spent in our basic education area and in support services. So that may mean less supplies. It may mean having to shop around on a monthly basis for the best paper deals. It's just, it is what it's going to be. Can you roll to the second page, Jackie? So this is where it starts getting into a little bit more detail. You can see under the local tax area, we have that 2.2 million coming in for 2021. And then after that, it's nothing. And so that sort of is what it is until we can pass a local levy. So when we go through and we're trying to estimate what our revenues could be in future years, we do know that our state general purpose apportionment, it does tend to increase with IPD, which is anywhere between 1.6 to 1.9% in the next 3 years. Obviously 1.6 to 1.9 is not a significant increase, but it's something. Federal revenues tend to increase very, very slowly or sometimes not at all. So I've done some conservative increases there as well. And same with our revenues from our other school districts. Those revenues are our non-high fees paid from our surrounding districts for the smaller districts that don't have high schools, and they send their high school age students to our district, and we receive payments from them for that. So can you scroll down a little bit more, Jackie? When it comes down to it and we're looking at our total revenues and what we're expecting to see versus our total expenditures, in order to balance it, I had to cut our expenditures to sort of match what our anticipated revenues are so that we didn't have a negative fund balance. We can't build a 4-year trend that has us basically going defunct. So we had to trim where we could. And that's what we're seeing here with these expenditures. And then hoping that by the 4th year, when you've gotten IPD for a few years, you have a little bit more money left over at the end of the year. With all of that being said, we do need to remember that our ending fund balance, which is our beginning fund balance for the next school year, we need to keep that between that 8 to 10% minimum fund balance category. And that requires us to have anywhere between $2.9 to $3.2 million in the bank at the very least. Do you guys have any questions about the general fund 4-year, Leanna?
Well, back on when you said that this is what we actually it's our full funding, what the state is calling fully funded. I'm wondering if we could, and you're very good at this, or I'm suggesting that we make a highlight, a simple highlight to show the community what the state funding of fully funding looks like, and then what actual funding looks like when we go out for the next levy. People just want to glance at something and then look away. So maybe something that shows that, like we see this every week, every month, but they don't. So something that shows them that, I think would be, it's pretty significant in what we need than what is called fully funding. I would say.
It is significant, but at the same time, when we get dinged for not being transparent, this is, a simple postcard doesn't seem to be very transparent. This is it. So if you want transparency, go into the details.
You can only get so much on a card, but then showing at the bottom, say, to see the full spread on this, please go to our website, and then you'd be able to have the full spread to show. But I think that it's a good mention to our community of, because I don't think that that's well understood. That when they say fully funding education through the state, or the state says that, people hear that, and then that's not happening, obviously. So something to show would be nice. And of course, we're completely transparent. We're right here on the video here, and this is available to them. And maybe just giving a link on maybe a postcard that says, to see the breakdown, here's the link for that. I think it would be worth it. Just my suggestion. I think it would be nice that would be very transparent, because that is the biggest question that I hear, is show us those numbers. That's what I always hear. Show us, prove it that it's not fully funded. So I think that would be worth mentioning.
Thank you, Lena. I do want to take a moment to state that our full budget document, the full 105 pages, is and will be posted to our website. Technically, budgets are due by August 31st for a Class 1 district, which is what we are. So that full document will be posted. If I obviously have no issues, if anybody has any questions regarding the budget or information put in there, for them to reach out and ask. I'd rather answer the questions, especially if something is confusing. Obviously, a 105-page document for a budget is something that a lot of people aren't used to seeing. Your own personal budget doesn't tend to be 105 pages long. So this is all, it's a state mandated budget. Districts that belong to what we call, like, with SIPSE Skyward, and do the F-195, all of their budgets look the same. So now, is there any other questions specific to the general fund 4-year summary? Okay, so we're going to move to the next fund. Now, with that being said, you can see that I've balanced it so that we do not have a negative fund balance for the general fund at any given point. Okay, so we're not budgeting to go bankrupt as a school district. So we'll just continue to cut wherever we can, if need be. Okay, continue scrolling down. Okay, so again, this is ASB. A 4-year summary is a very, very high level summary. It's based upon general estimates, with the fact that we're not necessarily certain what's going to happen with the full 2021 school year. I budgeted as if school was going to be occurring, and we'll just sort of see what happens. Now, there's been a fairly significant change with laws regarding what ASB needs to pay for. If we have students who qualify for free or reduced meals, Now, even with the fact that our district is a full CEP district, meaning everyone eats for free, but if they would normally qualify for free or reduced meals, they don't necessarily have to pay for a lot of the ASB fees anymore based upon the new guidance. So ASB has to pick up those costs, which means that the funds that are in like the athletic section of ASB, a big chunk of that is going to get depleted extremely quickly. So unfortunately, our students are going to end up having to fundraise quite a bit to keep that fulfilled here in future years.
And there is a new WASDA model policy that's an essential policy that we will be presenting in the coming months that covers all of that.
Okay, so ASB, again, fairly straightforward. The goal really is that the students earn the money and then they spend the money the following year or the same year. It's sort of an in and out. Over the course of multiple years, when they haven't spent the money that they earned that year, that's when we end up having a fund balance in ASB, which is what we have right now. So their fund balance, it's tracking to remain right around the 400,000 point through the course of the next 4 years. There's nothing super surprising within any of those trends. Do you guys have any questions specific to ASB? Okay, can we scroll down to the next fund? Okay, so this is debt service. With debt service, the main goal is to pay for any voted debt that the district has. The district currently has 3 voted debts on the book and 1 non-voted debt. Non-voted debt is paid for through transfers from the general fund into the debt service fund. Because it was not voted on, it cannot be collected from the community. Therefore, we have to pay it from the general fund. That non-voted debt was for the stadium replacement or upgrades. The 3 current voted debts we have 2 energy loans that were taken out back in, I believe, 2011-13 timeframe. One of them is set to finish here in December, and then the other one will be finishing in December of 2021. So both of those are set to expire here soon, and we will have fully paid those. And the last voted debt that we will have on the books is for the bond to replace the high school and remodel the other buildings. So this entire budget has been based upon paying the bond and our voted debt with transfers in to pay for the non-voted debt. Do you guys have any questions on our debt service fund? Okay, can we scroll to the next fund? Okay, so this is capital projects. This was my favorite one to do. As you can see, we have some numbers in 2021 and then nothing. It was very quick and easy and did not take very much brain power. Not a lot of forecasting to do. Again, this is the goal. In all reality, we really should have spent that $730,000 that's going to be in this fund by the end of this year, barring any crazy circumstances. All 4 of the projects are nearing completion as it is. So I don't necessarily foresee anything coming up to show that we would have a 2021, 2022 capital projects fund budget, but there may be some lingering dollars, 10, 15,000 that would go into 21, 22. Okay, next fund. Okay, transportation vehicle fund. Again, with this fund, one of the things I always tend to do with this, which has proven to be necessary for our district specifically, you can only spend what you've budgeted. So even though we're turning around and we are saving up technically our transportation vehicle fund budget in order to purchase quite a few more buses at the same time, we we tend to budget to spend something in that fund because if a bus is in an accident or is totaled, which has happened in the last 2 years by other drivers, we can't purchase the bus without having those expenditures in the budget. But overall, our 2020 to 2024 budget summaries for Transportation Vehicle Fund shows that we're going to be adding to our fund balance. Jackie, can you scroll down so that we can see where the ending fund balance will be after the 4 years? There's beginning and there's ending. So you can see where we're hoping to be ending here in the next 4 years. The only money that comes into this fund, we get depreciation allocations in August of every year from the state for the depreciation on our school buses. And if we end up having any insurance claims or payouts, revenues will come in that way. But other than that, without having a local transportation levy, we're not getting funding in the Transportation Vehicle Fund by anything else. Our depreciation each year is ranging about $123,000 to about $133,000. So it's sort of nominal. That technically isn't even enough to replace one large bus a year. So we've got to save it in order to be able to purchase multiple at the same time. Our small bus fleet, for the most part, has almost been entirely replaced over the last few years. And now we need to start focusing on our large bus fleet. Do you guys have any questions about the Transportation Vehicle Fund?
Nope.
Okay, and then I think that should be the last fund for our 4-year summary. So I think we're good for public session. Laura?
Okay, I will recess the board meeting into a public hearing for the North Mason School District 2020-2021 budget and the 4-year budget plan. I'm inviting testimony, and at the conclusion of the testimony, I will close the hearing. Jackie, has anyone phoned in to have questions or comments?
No, there has not been any comments.
Okay. Okay, then based on that, I will close the hearing and ask for a motion to adopt the 2021 budget resolution.
So moved.
Thanks, Craig. Is there any discussion? All right, I'll do a roll call vote. Leanna?
Aye.
Craig?
Aye.
John? Okay, Art?
Aye.
Thank you, and I vote aye, and the resolution is adopted. Thank you, and now we're at board development and linkage, the superintendent update.
Okay, I'm just gonna watch that so I don't miss. Sometimes I miss things. The first things I wanted to talk about, we have the budget status reports. Are you ready with those, Ashley? Okay.
I am. Okay. So we'll start with our other funds first. So this is for the month ending in July. So we only have one more month to report on, and technically this fiscal year will have ended. So Capital Projects Fund, we're ending the month of July with about $728,784 in that fund. Debt service has about $1.2 million left in that fund, and that's where we'll see debt service begin the new year. We don't have any more payments coming out of the debt service fund prior to the beginning of September 1st. ASB currently has about $419,000 invested, and our transportation vehicle fund is currently at $176,000. Now with our big bus being delivered on the 27th or 28th of this month, we're going to see that drop by about $135,000, but we will be receiving our $123,000 depreciation payment at the end of this month as well. So they'll nearly offset each other. We'll go into next year with about $154,000 in the transportation vehicle fund. Now, I left the enrollment on the second page. Obviously, nothing changed with it since the state closed our face-to-face schooling operations and paid us at an estimated enrollment amount. They did so throughout the rest of the fiscal year. Do you guys have any questions about any of the other funds? Okay, let's go into the, oh, okay, let's go into the general fund. Okay, so I'm excited to present on this one this month. We've done a lot of work as a team at the district on our finances as a whole in order to build a fund balance going into this coming year. Our projected year-to-date revenues, we've collected about 93.8%. So that's about 3% over what we were projected to collect at this point of the year. Our local sources are at about 109%. So not only does local levy go through that, but so does donations. We have seen an influx of donations to the school from other local vendors. So these are like businesses and even nationwide businesses who donated some funds to the school for things to offset like PPE costs for COVID and such. So that's why we're seeing that at about 110% as of right now. Our state resources were about a little over 2% over what was projected for us to be. That's pretty much a wash. That's where we would expect to be. And then our federal sources were just about 80%, so about 5% under where we should be at this point this year. Our federal sources are all based upon claims. Some of our grants were for PD, professional development for staff. Well, once school had to resume in a remote fashion and all type of PD and travel got slashed for face-to-face trainings, we weren't able to spend those grant funds. Now, thankfully, we do have 100% carryover of those grants. So those balances will move into next year and we will have the opportunity to spend them next year. And so we've been making plans for that. On this page as well, I wanted to specifically point out the fact that you're not seeing state forest in one of our top 10 sources of funding revenue for this school year. In past years, the state forest revenue coming in has exceeded $1 million. And this year we didn't even break 72,000. So again, that source of revenue is very unreliable and not something we can necessarily budget for. Now, we did receive increased non-high participation so far for this year at about $185,000, which means that we had more high school students transfer into our district or come to our district from our other participating schools than what was originally anticipated. Can we scroll down to our expense page? Okay, so that first green semicircle, this is the one that we use to track where our ending fund balance is going to be at the end of the year. Now, it needs to be between 8 and 10% based upon our resolution. And currently we're tracking for our year-end fund balance to be about 9.95%. I do expect for it to be just about at that. Our August apportionment is one of our higher apportionment months, and I anticipate being able to invest about $400,000, which will keep us at that amount going into the school year. Now, it's important to note that even though we're going into the school year with a higher fund balance, the state changed the way that they did apportionment so that during the months of May and June, we're only going to be collecting 5% apportionment in the month of May and 6% apportionment in the month of June. During those 2 months alone, I'll end up having to invest at least $1.9 million to pay basic expenses. So if we don't have technically that extra $2 million in the bank at that point, we wouldn't be able to pay our bills. So
Ashley, does it cost us money? Are we charged fees, or does it cost us money to disinvest funds?
No. Okay. I do it twice a month. And so basically I do all the numbers and I find out what we have left at the end of the month. And then I send an email over to the treasurer explaining what I want them to invest and where.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, so our total expenditures, actual year to date, we're trending at about 92.95%. Technically, based upon prior year projections, we would be at about 93.14% at this point of the year. With school going remote and us having to sort of change up where we were spending our money, we spent more on stuff, supplies, PPE, in anticipation for the coming school year. And so we're seeing that gap between that 92 and that 93% close. Our salaries and benefits actual year to date versus projected, they're about 6% under. Again, that's due to those last minute positions that we did not fill going into the 1920 school year. And same thing on the basic education actual year to date side, you're seeing that decrease because of those positions we didn't fill going into this year as well. Jackie, can you scroll to the next page? So our dark blue line is our current trend. So you can see where we are for July and where it's anticipating we will be in August. That green triangle is where we had budgeted to end the year at. That 2.822 million is technically 8% of our expenditures. So that would be putting us in our 8 to 10% bracket. And right now we're trending to be at 3.4 million for ending fund balance. Now, with that being said, there may be some changes to that due to computer purchases to get us into this next school year and ensure that all of our students have access to computers, regardless of their ability to access internet. Having a computer and a thumb drive may help them be able to do their assignments even if they don't have internet. So we definitely wanted to ensure that we could go one-to-one for technology going into the 2021 school year. In addition to that, that $3.4 million does include our non-spendable inventory, and we have stocked up on quite a bit of PPE in anticipation of being able to come back to school at some point this year and ensure that our staff and students will be able to do so in a safe manner. Okay, so next page. Okay, so on the revenue side, if you're looking at that far right box, that year to date percent of budget is one of the things that I track just to ensure that we're collecting the revenue from all the sources that we should be, and to determine whether or not there's any huge variances. Now, the largest variance that we're currently seeing is under the local support non-tax, okay? And so some individuals may not understand what that means. It just means that it's not levy dollars, but it is local dollars. So it's coming in and coded in such a way that it's come from either local community, government, whatever it happens to be. Now, our specific increase was due to our food service program. In the spring, the state made a decision that those revenues weren't going to come through the normal food service revenue codes. They were going to come through what we call an 8900 revenue code, which is like other community services. And they've decided that because we were providing food for community kids as a whole, that it was considered local support non-tax. And so that's why we're seeing that at 244% of our year-to-date budget. Everything else is trending right around where we would expect it to be, even if we're at 114%, for example, on the federal general purpose. If you look at the actual dollar value of the increase, it's actually nominal. And again, the other school district section of the revenues, that was at non-high participation, that was higher than what we had originally anticipated those incoming high school students from the other districts would be, which is why we're seeing it at just under 124%. Our expenditures, don't look at the travel line with the 4,900%. That's, I know, Craig, it looks completely crazy, and it's simply because of how this report pulls in travel. That's just
I don't know if
disregard
I'm on
that.
your, I don't know if I'm on your computer screen or not, but I was like,
I know.
When he
I know, you
when he
were.
called me out, I mean, it's like, come on.
You were. I saw you laughing. Our current year to date travel cost for the 1920 school year was $37,817. When we budget, we have about 3,600 budget account codes. Obviously, we don't want to put a number in 3,600 areas. That's 3,600 things you have to touch to get the numbers in. So we put them in more of like summary accounts. That summary account doesn't hit this report. That's why you're seeing it that way. But we are under in certificated employee salaries and classified employee salaries and benefits. Again, that's due to the reduction of staff going into the 1920 school year. You will see that we are over in both our purchase services and our MSOCs, our stuff. A good chunk of our overage in our stuff is due to PPE that we purchased when we knew that there would be a need for PPE coming into this school year. We started having to stock up on it. That stuff is flying off the shelves like no other, as I'm sure you guys can imagine. And prices started skyrocketing. So we had to buy what
Is there reimbursement opportunities for those PPE with regards to whether it's the federal CARES funding or anything like that, or state? Is there, or are we just pretty much, that's just, we have to spend it we're out of our pocket basically?
Right now it's out of our pocket. We had originally applied for FEMA help and had gone through this entire FEMA process, both Dana and I. And then after, yes, and then after I think it was a few months of work on this FEMA grant, we were informed that the federal government decided that they weren't going to offer support to school districts. And so they felt that the CARES Act funding that we were getting was sufficient and that they didn't need anything else. Now, our CARES Act funding was $491,000, and it wasn't enough to cover the increased needs for technology and for PPE. So at this time, the PPE is coming out of our pocket, basically.
I do want to recognize, though, we have had huge donations from different folks throughout the country and our community, most recently from the Mason County Emergency Management Team that donated 6,000 masks for reusable masks for once we get to come back to in person.
Okay, so I don't necessarily have anything else specific to point out here. Do you guys have any questions regarding anything that has been presented for the month ending in July or July 31st?
I don't.
Okay, well, that's it then.
Thank you, Ashley.
You're welcome.
Okay, teaching and learning update.
Yeah, as we go back to the teaching, then thank you. My eyes are getting really bad. Teaching and learning update. There are a couple things I want to highlight first that I included copies in the board packet for you. And they were just notices from some community partners that I just think it's important to talk about. The first one is from InvestEd. And those of you who have been around for a long while will remember that as being called the Saul Haas Foundation Fund, and it is now InvestEd. And this is just a report from them on the amount, on the dollars that were provided to students in our district this past 1920 school year. In the fall, we were initially funded at the level of 1,750, and there were matching funds from our community of another $500. And then we received additional COVID-19 student funds from Saul Haas for from InvestEd, $2,790. So they were able to provide support for kids in our two high schools, primarily is who they serve, of $4,860. And prior to the requirement that all ASB costs be taken out of out of ASB for kids with in high poverty, InvestEd was one of the people who helped us provide things like that. It also helps us provide sports equipment for kids who want to participate and can't. and can do a variety of things. In my past life as a principal, we even used the dollars from InvestEd at one time to help a family in our school district who had significant special needs of multiple children in the home and did not have a washer and dryer. And we were able to work with this InvestEd to help the family with that. So they're a great resource to support needs of individual students in our district. And we just wanted to say thank you to them publicly. And then the other piece that I had to highlight for you was the notice we received from Kitsap Credit Union about our participation over the last years with the financial wellness classes that they've been partnering with the teachers at our high school to do. It's a really great program. It's wonderful to have partners help us prepare our students to be successful community members in the coming years. And so I wanted to say thank you to them as well and highlight, you do have a full report from Kitsap Credit Union in the board policy that talks about the impact on all the schools they serve, including our high schools. All right, other things that I think it's important, as you know, we are gearing up for an unusual start to the year. We did reach an MOU with NMEA. We did not have it in time to include in this board packet with signatures, so it will be in the next board packet. We had our building leadership teams met today. Staff will be meeting next week and doing training and preparing for this very unusual start. Also next week, high school students will have the opportunity to pick up the laptops that are assigned to them, with that occurring for other students in the district on September 2nd and 3rd, the first 2 scheduled days of school. All of this will be published multiple ways, has been already, but will be published with more details in the next few days throughout the community. So our staff is working hard. It's going to be very different, but we hope for a successful, different kind of year this year. And then I just had an invitation this week, so I wanted to give you a heads up. As you know, the idea of the Belfair bypass or the freight corridor has been central to many conversations in our community over the years, and we did know that plans are going forward. So I will have information for you at the September board meeting, because I have a meeting next Tuesday with Department of Transportation to look at the schematics and the plans for the impact on our school district, where the exit from the freight corridor will be just outside of our high school visitor stadium parking lot. So we'll have a lot to talk about that next time we see each other. So I think, and Ashley's kind of already mentioned capital projects. The stadium we all thought would be done. Really, it was held up by COVID. What we're waiting on is the electricians who aren't able to come to work to finish doing some last work on the sound booth and the scoreboard. So as soon as the electricians can have a day out here, that project will be already good to go. We also had an incident this past week where some vandalism occurred on our track and on the stadium fences. And the district has been able to follow up with that. Law enforcement is following up in that. Repairs will be made working with our insurance company. So I think that's all the major stuff for right now on my report.
Okay, thank you. Well, our upcoming board letter columnists are John for August, and Leanna has September, I have October, and Art has November. And now we're at assurance of organizational performance and policy review, the monitoring reports that we have to review. Of course, the board superintendent relationship policies, those are not monitored by the superintendent. The superintendent does not offer a monitoring report for that. We monitor those and that relationship ourselves. We do have expectations of the superintendent, ER1, and I would like to read these expectations so that it's out in the open about what we expect of the superintendent of this school district. The superintendent shall cause or allow only those practices, activities, decisions, conditions, procedures, or organizational circumstances which are lawful, ethical, safe, respectful, prudent, fair, equitable, dignified, and in compliance with contract, state and federal law and regulation, board policy, and collective bargaining agreements. And that is a very tall order. And I have her monitoring report in front of me, and I think you all have had a chance to review it, have you? Okay. I would entertain a motion to find the superintendent's performance to comply with ER1 expectations of the superintendent and welcome any comments that you might have.
So moved.
Thanks, Craig. Any comments?
It's right now with everything that's going on, I don't even know what's prudent, fair, or equitable. I think that's probably pretty hard to even figure out right now. So doing the best you can with what you have.
That's true. I believe her last bullet here in her monitoring report kind of explains what's going on. In the context of the ongoing pandemic, we have expanded our efforts to communicate with our stakeholders about the work of the district, the planning of the school year, and decisions about safety, equity, and our ongoing work to support effective student learning in North Mason. And I know that this is something that has gotten a lot of attention, a lot of hours put into it over the summer by her and her team. And I for one, appreciate it, and I know it's a tall order to fill. So did I get a motion to approve? Craig, was that
Yes,
you?
Yep, it was.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, I'll do a roll call here. John?
Aye.
Leanna?
Aye.
Art?
Aye.
Craig?
Aye.
And I vote aye, and the board finds the superintendent's performance to comply with ER1. And now we're at ER3, treatment of parents, students, staff, and public. This is a long one. I won't read it out loud. However, I would welcome comments and a motion.
I move that we accept ER3 as presented.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Any comments?
I think the superintendent is notoriously dignified.
Okay. Thank you, John. I think the Zoom meetings have been kind of extraordinarily successful for what they can be so far. I think now that people are getting used to that, that's something that we will continue throughout the school year. I know Dana has a plan to do that. But I think it's a really, it's a convenient way for people to be informed and participate without leaving their homes. So I'll take a roll call vote. John?
Aye.
Leanna raised her hand.
Sorry, Leanna.
I just wanted to say again from the last special meeting, but that your calmness and answering every question and working as a team to make all these things work, it really stands out in hey, we're all going through a tough time, but we're in it together kind of thing. And it really hits some hearts in a good way. So you're noticed.
Thank you.
Go ahead, John. Did you have something?
I can't hear John.
Oh, I agree with Leanna. I think that's absolutely right. I think our superintendent has been a model of decorum during all this, and that's no easy thing.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll have a roll call vote. John?
Aye.
Leanna?
Aye.
Art?
Aye.
Craig?
Aye.
I vote aye, and we find that the board superintendent performance complies with the superintendent's performance complies with ER3, treatment of staff, students, parents, and the public. And now we are looking at ER4, which is budget planning.
I
I'll
move
entertain a
that we,
motion.
I move that we find superintendent's performance to comply with ER4.
Okay. Any comments?
Great job in considering all the ups and downs and backwards and forwards, and hey, we just got the decision or made it, all that. So I think all these balls being thrown at your face that you're doing really good, batting it out and working with the budget and just taking it as it comes. I think you're doing great.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
We have a solid team.
I would also like to give my gratitude for that too. Going from, I think we were just above 6% at one point this year for our ending fund balance to being almost at 10, well within our means. Understanding the challenges of not having a levy going into next year, but that budget, that solid budgeting prevents us from, getting hit for bond ratings and things like that, and our basically our credit. In the event that for whatever reason, whatever else 2020 decides to bring us, if there's a need for us to go to outside sources for revenue, having shown adequate financial prudence prevents excess costs for us to access resources if that's what's needed. So my congratulations and thanks for that.
Thank you.
I just want to add to that too. This is part of a tradition we've had, and it's served us very well in the past, and I'm delighted to see it continue.
Thank you, John. And I would like to, I'd like to say that Ashley Supre Murphy now
Murphy.
Yes.
has been extraordinarily flexible and creative with the budget, and she's always welcomed questions and been very thorough in her responses. And I appreciate all of her work and all of the work that your team has done.
Thank you.
Now we'll take a roll call vote to find the superintendent's performance to comply with ER4 budget planning. John?
Aye.
Leanna?
Aye.
Art?
Aye.
Craig?
Aye.
Aye, and I vote aye. So now we are at policy review, and I think I'm going to turn this over to Art because he suggested that there might be some policies that we would want to, as a board, consider reviewing. And he and I met with Dana and went through some of these, but I'm going to let him take the lead on this discussion.
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to try to do this quickly, but I think we can get over with the first few things, and then we just need to discuss briefly something else and maybe hopefully segue later into another meeting. If we could look at the GP4E1 document and look at that document and just, do we use this? It looks to me like we don't. We have other ways of having handled this. And so the question I have, which we can ignore or not, is do we need to have this as a monitoring document? And if we do, we should start to use it. If not, we could get rid of it. So there we are on that one. I don't have any motion to make, but we could probably leave that aside for now. Then if we can go into the next one, which is the GP11 board member conflict of interest. If you will look on the, let's see, where is it? Page 2. Very top of page 2. Whoops, it's not there. This is, maybe it's the very bottom of page 1 then. I'm not seeing that. Are we at the right one?
7, look at number 7, Art. Is that the one you're talking about?
Let's see. Are we on GP11, board member conflict of interest?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's section 2. I misinterpret. Section 2 is towards the top. sorry. Look at that section 2. That one sentence is out of line. We
Yes.
need to, and I'm going to make a motion that we strike section 2. That is actually against the law. And I can quote you, it's RCW 42.23.030, which is referred to in a different policy as something that we cannot do. So we need to strike that. So there's my motion that we strike section 2 completely.
Okay, we have a motion to strike item 2. An individual director may be designated as clerk and or purchasing agent at the prevailing hourly wage from GP 11, board member conflict of interest. Any comments or discussion?
What was,
Alright.
and maybe this is just for historical, what was the reason that was put in there in the first place?
It probably came from a boilerplate that we used
Oh, okay.
in Washington School District when we were developing our own governance policy.
Okay.
And also from.
I was wondering if at any time
Right,
the
it's
board-
also comes from when we were probably a much smaller district, when some of that sort of stuff did happen with smaller
Oh, okay.
districts. We don't qualify for that anymore. Okay, so
All right, I have a motion to strike item number 2. Roll call vote, John,
Aye.
Leanna,
I,
Art,
aye.
Craig,
Aye.
and I vote aye, so motion passes.
Okay, if we could go to the GP8 agenda planning, there it is. This one's page 2, line 2. So it's towards the very top of page 2. Okay, we'd stop right there. That paragraph is referring to is what gets into the consent agenda. And the very last several set of words is and monitoring reports for executive requirement policies. We don't do that. We do those monitoring reports separately. So we should have that removed from what goes into the consent agenda. It's suggesting it in this document here, but I would like to move that we strike that part and monitoring reports for executive requirements policies from GP8.
Okay, we have a motion to strike the last phrase from item 6A, governance process GP8. Any discussion, comments? Okay, we'll do it.
I do on that one. I guess I don't disagree with what you're saying of how we operate, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to make future action like kind of handcuff future boards if that's a decision that they decide to make. I mean, do you think do you think it's a better practice to have sort of stuff outside of the consent agenda? I guess that because there was obviously like before, there's obviously a reason it was in there in the first place, and it hasn't been our practice. But
well, one could argue that, well, having it left in there, it doesn't hurt us, which is probably correct because we do deal with it separately. We've not been putting them in there. One could then say, well, by having it in there and by the description of what this means, it just means we could be saying, well, we accept the report. Doesn't mean we're approving the superintendent's conduct. That is what we do separately. But since we do the whole thing separately, I just thought we should, let's skip that. It doesn't mean we can't put them in there, even if it's not in this line here. It just takes it away from that. So it's kind of,
yeah, I just see it both sides because with executive requirements, to me, it almost falls into that first that section that's on kind of just above it is personnel actions. I don't know if those two things are closely aligned, that we've kind of taken those because for the most part, we base superintendent evaluation of the executive requirements as well as ends. But as well as contracts and things like that.
Right. Well, look at the
I guess. Go ahead.
Look at the very next section B, the second line. Executive requirements monitoring reports will be pulled for discussion only if members have concerns about reasonable interpretation or compliance. And I guess we should probably get that out because we do deal with that fully when we do the ERs later, and that would be, in a sense, a little bit of a conflict.
Okay.
Really, what you're saying, Art, is that you would like, because our current practice is not to have these monitoring reports included in the consent agenda for the purpose of being able to discuss them openly as a singular item. So is
Right.
that what you're saying? And these were another boilerplate issue, I think, when we were literally plagiarizing another school district's governance policies.
Right.
Using theirs.
And I guess I should amend my
No.
own to say, not only strike that and monitoring reports for executive requirements, but remove that entire second sentence of item B, because we do that fully, regardless of whether we think we should pull it or not. We do that fully.
All right, so it has been moved to strike the last phrase in line 2 on page 2 and the last sentence of B. Everybody understand that?
He is
I think
just-
it's entire B in its entirety.
yeah.
No.
No, because
The
we
first
can
sentence.
remove it
Oh, okay.
from the consent agenda.
Okay,
Yeah. Okay,
got it.
all right. Any other discussion on that?
I think it's a good idea. I think it strengthens policy governance because as Art
Okay.
was saying that this was left over from another time, well, let's get rid of the hangovers. And I think that this is a good thing. It just emphasizes the importance to us of policy governance.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion?
Well, I appreciate you, Art, for digging into that and doing that and cleaning it up. So I think so. I think you're right.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. John,
Aye.
Leanna,
Aye.
Art,
Aye.
and Craig,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So those two changes will be made to GP8 agenda planning.
Okay, moving on to GP 12. If we can open, yeah, we're getting there. Look at line 11 and line 12. On line 11, it's actually 10 and 11, and may receive limited compensation as allowed by law for time devoted to board service. Well, that's reflecting the law. What we are saying in line 12 is no board member shall receive compensation for his or her service on the board. I do like that. Just the two things, putting them together like that, I feel makes some sense of confusion. And I'm not quite sure. I don't have a motion to make on this. This is the sort of thing that we should really maybe talk about later, if it's important enough or whatever. So I just want to alert folks to that those things, two things are there together and they don't really fully, unless we maybe rewrite it slightly to say, the law says that boards may receive compensation. And here's the, cite the law. But our policy, number one, is that no board member shall receive compensation. I'm not getting into whether you guys agree or not with that part, but that's where we're at now. So just want to leave that there.
I would actually like to make a motion
Craig?
I would like to make a motion to strike from the end of line 9. Board member shall be compensated for expense and may receive limited compensation as allowed by law for time devoted to board service.
Well, wait a minute,
I
you
would like
don't,
that stricken.
you don't
Yeah,
want compensated for expenses incurred?
right.
instance-
Mhm.
Part- Yeah, that part includes like going to the conference, school board conference.
So we want to keep that, right?
Yes.
It's all okay. I confused myself.
Can you refresh me on the lines that you said that you wanted to?
I
we're
would,
looking at not number 12 or there, but the other two before you said that.
on line,
Actually,
10 yeah, go ahead, Craig.
I was gonna say.
Go ahead, Craig, it's your motion.
I want to reframe that motion. I would like the sentence to reflect that board members shall be, how do I want to say this?
Say that.
I want to eliminate the compensated for performing the responsibilities, but allow for reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses.
Okay, so board members shall be reimbursed instead of compensated?
May be reimbursed at their discretion.
Okay, for expenses incurred. Oh, okay,
Expenses incurred out of pocket.
okay. So board members may be reimbursed for expenses incurred out of pocket.
While conducting conducting official duties.
Okay,
Art, what was the first ones that you said? I was just trying to go back.
Yeah, I was pointing out line 10, starting with comma, and may receive limited compensation. That's the part where I feel there's some,
just
Problem.
strike that last phrase.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that would be a cleaner motion right there. Just
Okay,
strike that last phrase.
and we can leave in 12, line 12, number 1. No
Correct.
board member shall receive
Yeah.
compensation. Okay. All right, we have a motion for GP 12, board member compensation and expenses, to revise line 9, beginning with board members may be reimbursed for expenses incurred out of pocket while conducting official duties. And then strike and may receive limited compensation is allowed by law for time devoted board
Well,
service.
Laura, that's saying the same thing. So if we just have that sentence start with board members may receive limited compensation or may receive reimbursement as allowed by law for time devoted to board service.
Okay.
Let me. Do you see what I'm saying?
Reimbursement-
Yeah.
Okay.
May receive
Reimbursement
reimbursement
for expenses incurred.
devoted to board service.
Okay. Expenses incurred for time, it's not
No.
for time. Yeah, it
No, it's
would
not for
be,
time.
okay.
Well, it's for expenses, for toll
Yeah.
fees or if something like that.
What, in performing their responsibilities? What's already that part
Yeah.
in the sentence? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think you guys are getting the concept.
right. The gist of it is we want to be able to have compensation for the hotel fees at school board conferences and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But not to have the stipend allowed that the state is for just being a board member and the travel to and for going to a board meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna change it to board members may be reimbursed for expenses incurred in performing board service.
Okay,
You like that?
I like that.
Okay. All right, we have a motion to revise line 9 to board members may be reimbursed for expenses incurred in performing board service, GP 12, board member compensation and expenses. Any more discussion? Okay, I'll have a roll call vote. John,
Aye.
Leanna,
I
Art,
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
and I vote aye. And so GP 12 now has been revised. Okay, Art, let's go to GP 2.
Last one, but it's actually, this is the complex one. There's no specific thing in GP2 to point out to because there's several other GPs that there's GP2E1, GP2E2, GP2E3, and GP2E7 that are all part of the same thing. And this comes into the potential of what are board district boundaries, what are at-large members or anything like that, this sort of stuff. I think we need to have a discussion because we have the census coming up and we need to deal with whether we want to or not want to, how we're going to handle what comes from the census. We have a set period of time which those GPs tell us for making decisions about what happens with the census. And I think we ought to be looking at those GP policies, which starts with 2 and goes to 2E7 to deal with that. And it's just too long and complex to try to figure out right here. I think we should have a separate meeting to look at this carefully. And I don't have an agenda on this other than that, I'd like to just bring the issue up no matter how it turns out. I doubt that it's going to.
Okay, well,
Anyway, so.
we can we can have a discussion about that, maybe to schedule a Zoom meeting for a special work study session. However, GP2, in my mind, is how we govern together. It's how we treat one another, how we encourage diversity in viewpoints, focusing on leadership rather than administrative detail. This particular policy does not have anything in it about those other items that you discussed, like district boundaries and those sorts of things. This is how we behave as a board to one another and our responsibility as a board member. So I don't think GP2 is one that we need to discuss, but those others that you mentioned,
Right.
we
Yeah, those are those sub policies, GP2E.
right. So those would be the ones. Do you agree? Do you all agree with me that this particular one, GP2, we can talk about it at the special work study session as well, but actually this one I live by. So it's we just need to, maybe Jackie could connect with you all and find a time that we could get into a Zoom meeting to discuss those other policies that you mentioned, Art.
Right.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. And then the other issue that came up, and Craig actually introduced this, was how we treat these monitoring reports during this time of pandemic, where there are many of them that relate to, well, for instance, student discipline is one, that there would not be a monitoring report for that. It would be suspended during the time when it does not apply because there are no kids here in school. Student activities and that type of thing. So we talked about somehow putting into writing the conditions around suspension of those monitoring reports that would not apply. And in my mind, I feel like that would almost be a memorandum of understanding between the board and their employee, which is the superintendent, much the same as a memorandum of understanding between a bargaining unit and the administration and superintendent. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I actually like that a lot better than trying to, whether it's create a new policy or even going policy by policy to suspend certain items. I mean, the items you highlighted are right on, Laura, but there's a couple more that that I found that were kind of bugging me. One was in executive limitations, and this is less about our executive requirements, and this is less about our superintendent and more maybe a shot across the bow at the state, that we're going to hold the superintendent accountable. For instance, academic standards and practices. We ensure that all students are provided fair and equitable access to district programs and learning opportunities. We can't do it.
Right.
I don't know that we could really try hard, but I don't know that there's a way that we could actually say without a shadow of a doubt that every student, all nearly 2,400, received a fair and equitable access. I just don't think we can do that. And then under school engagement, sort of like what you were saying, with students participating in a variety of co-curricular and extracurricular activities. So maybe just that MOU that would just dictate that board policies in relation to in-person learning, or the in-person standard practices could be suspended, and it could even be in a way of just acknowledging it on the monitoring report. I think if the board agrees that there's certain things that we just can't, and short of going through every policy and cherry picking each one, whether it's through MOU or just board acknowledgement that there's going to be stuff.
Okay.
We just can't.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments?
Are we saying that we're acknowledging that it's not fair to everyone at this time, or what are we saying?
No, no.
I'm
we're
trying
not
to understand the words that you're saying.
Okay.
Maybe I'm
What-
quiet.
Okay, maybe I can make it a little clearer. What we're saying is that because
No,
those
well-
budget reports are what we use to evaluate our employee mid-year and then again at the end of the year, the monitoring reports are what we use.
Mhm.
So because that's part of our expectation for her performance, we want to be able to specify or at least put into writing that we understand that there are monitoring reports and there are expectations for the superintendent that simply cannot be met because of the pandemic, because of the conditions that have changed due to online learning totally, due to the hybrid model, due to no activities.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. It's not about equity for students. It's about changing the expectation for the superintendent to create a monitoring report for something that is impossible to do right now.
Okay, so we're saying that she's gonna do like an MOU saying this is, because we're still expecting that she is going to give her 115%, whatever, at going at this, and I know that she will. We're still expecting the same outcome, I feel, even if school's in session or not, because we're expecting that. I'm just trying to figure out where I guess,
Like Leanna, like the discipline report.
yeah.
I'm not going to be able to give you one that says how many kids got suspended.
Okay,
who did
okay. I see what you
something
mean.
at school, you know.
We
Yeah.
just want to put it in writing that that's not, that we understand that she's not going to be able to give us all the statistics on discipline because there won't be any.
Okay, that's what
Yeah.
I was trying to understand that, but that I get it now.
Okay, okay. And I can work with Dana to put together some kind of a statement to that effect that we can all sign that she will have for her file too. Everybody good with that? Okay, we're at the good of the order. Do any of the board members or the superintendent have any comments or announcements
I have
that,
one comment, Laura, I'm sorry, just
Oh, John, we lost you again. Unmute, mute.
look, there was one of the G policies that had redundancy in it about community and, oh rats, what was it? It said the same thing in two different, one was a G, I don't have the note here. One was it was one of the G's and it was one of like a C or a D. And one said community standards and diversity. And the other said community standards and diversity. They had the same thing. Somebody could pick it up that looked at those, but they were under two different letters under the G that said basically the same thing twice.
well, if you can find that and let us know what it is and where it's at, we'll,
Sure.
we'll,
I'll just, well, I do send it to Dana or what?
Yeah.
yeah, send it to Dana. Thanks, John. Anybody else?
I do have something else. Just a couple things, not directly, but it's a little bit more personal, I guess. Let's see, where did I write it down so I can remember it? One thing is, I wanted to let you all know that I'm going to be going down to halftime. So it's a consequence of the COVID-19 stuff. I'm going down to halftime work, halftime in my job coming up starting September 1st. Second is I've also had some additional health issues, and apparently I have gout, but with that, gout is not a disease. It is a condition. And I'm learning that it is something that I have to deal with, diet and other sort of things wise, to prevent it from happening again. But just so that you know, that's how part of summer's been going. Summer's been not fun for me because there's no kids. And I really miss them. So enough said.
Thanks, Art. Anybody else?
For good of the order.
Yep.
Well, here's just a philosophic comment that we might think about in general. I understand why we don't take you know, a lot of school boards do get compensation, X amount an hour or something like that. And I understand our tradition here. I'm not sure that what we do is the most democratic thing. We're on the board, among other reasons, because we can afford to be. And I'm just wondering if offering compensation might be a more democratic procedure by inviting board membership to members of the community that might not be able to afford to serve otherwise. I'm not making any motion. I'm just putting out an idea, since that's one of the things we never question. And I just wanted to say, I think it's worth thinking about.
Thanks, John. I will add, however, that if we are compensated, that comes out of somebody's budget somewhere. And I would hate to think that compensation for a school board member would impact the supplies that go to a classroom or a student. Just a thought.
Same way, but then I could afford to be here.
Right. Anybody else?
Leanna has her hand raised.
First, I'm praying for you, Art, and I hope the best for you.
Thanks.
And I'm broke like a joke, and I am on this board because I love being here. And if I didn't have the gas money to drive there, I would hitchhike. But I think it says, I'm not saying anything about my integrity, but anybody that comes on this board with $0 to $1 million in your pocket, whatever reason you're here, I know it's for heart. And I think we're rich in heart. And I would never be compensated or accept compensation for this. And offering, I would rather it go definitely back into the classroom. Just my thoughts. But that's it.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I do. This will be my last board meeting. Tomorrow, Laura, you'll be getting my resignation. My family and I are moving out of the district. It's been incredibly fulfilling to serve with the board, especially all of you. You know, through 2 different stints on the board. You know, serving with you, Laura, John, and Art. Leanne, I haven't had as much experience with you, but it's all been great, and so it's been very worthwhile. I hope that I've positive, and I've all Dana, you're a fantastic superintendent. The district, the community is lucky to have you, and all the staff. My kids, my daughter has had most of her education through North Mason. My son, up until next year, all of his education's been here. He's way smarter than I am. So that's all. A lot of that's due to what our community's provided, and I hope going forward, I'm not going to be part of it. I do hope maybe another voice coming onto the board can help heal maybe some of these frictions that have started to occur with our district. But I hope going forward that the community realizes what they have, and just as a point of, because I don't have to answer for the repercussions. If they don't, shame on them. So yeah, so what I got for my good of the order.
Thank you for your service, Craig.
Here, here.
Greg, I
Great
just
to
want
see
to
you.
say that you have been honestly one of the best board members that I've ever worked with in all of my, I don't know, 13 years. I think your desire to make things right and to get it right has been noticed by many, and your work on the legislative committee and down in Olympia won't be forgotten. And I will miss you, for one. I'll miss you and all of the questions that you ask all the time, because it makes us all think, and I think that's a good thing. So I wish you luck wherever you're going, and get on the school board or wherever it is, because they need you. Sure it is. But thank you. Thank you for your.
I don't know that that's going to be in my future. I think there's going to be a lot of parenting and a lot of other stuff. So, but thank you. I appreciate those words.
Here, here. I just wanted to add my commendations as well. It's been great serving with you, Craig, and I really appreciate, in particular, your interest in and your activities in as a legislative representative. I think you've done a great job.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
And Craig, you also know how I feel and my thoughts about you, and I'm really gonna miss you. Bless you.
Same to you, Art.
All right, enough of the love in.
Thank
So-
you. Super uncomfortable.
Yeah. Okay,
Just hear
Director
sweating.
Patty. Has,
All right.
has the board
Uh,
self-assessment.
Yeah.
Be honest.
I am, and I'm not going to call us not satisfactory in general meeting behavior, but I took us off the rails a little bit under the Ashley's budget report. But I'm going to give us a freebie on that one because it's Zoom. So I find this satisfactory in our general meeting behavior and all the subtopics there. In governance principles review, I like tonight. I really actually enjoyed those talks about our policies and how we operate, and kind of making some course redirections, which I think is what the heart of policy governance is. So I'm going to say that we followed the principles of policy governance in that, and overall our behavior was satisfactory.
Okay, thank you. Our next board meeting will be on September 17th at 6:30, right, in the Zoom arena. And I thank you all for being available. And if you will just contact Jackie and set up a time to come by and sign all of the paperwork. Appreciate it. Thank you. And the meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.